I am going to show you a quick walkthrough for using Adobe Illustrator. For this walkthrough, the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to make sure that you have access to Adobe Illustrator. So you'll go to the Start menu, and if it's in there, it'll be right underneath the A's in Adobe Illustrator. If you don't have it, you'll need to download it through Adobe Creative Cloud. Once you have it open, you'll see something that looks similar to this. You're going to go up to the top left and click on New File. Once you've clicked on New File, you might actually see it set up like this. Mine, if it says points right here, that's not really something that's easy for you to understand. So we'll pick something that's easy, which is inches. Now you'll notice while you're in here that you have the option to do feet and yards. You can even use the metric system. We're going to start with something small. So we're going to click on inches. When we click on inches, you can see that this makes a little bit more sense. This is 8.5 by 11 inches, which is a standard paper size. We're going to leave it at that. I want you to title it. I'm just going to title it The Year. I'm going to name it Duck, because we're going to make a duck on here. And then I'm going to put my name. You put your name in there. Oh, 2 eyes. There we go. Put your name in there so that your teacher can find you a little bit better. Now, the color mode is CMYK. Usually we use things for printing, so it's good to have it set up for CMYK. If you're going to put it for web use, you might want to try RGB, which they have here. But we're going to do CMYK, and then high raster effects means 300 ppi. Now, raster is something that we used a lot with Photoshop. You're actually going to be using more vector things in this program in Adobe Illustrator. And if you recall, vector means that it can be resized to any size without stretching out the pixels. And then a raster is also something that has a different file format that can be shrunk down, and it's a little easier. I feel is better for understanding. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and click on Create. Once we've created it, you'll see it's just a piece of paper. It looks like your standard sheet of paper. And it looks similar to Photoshop. You might even see some tools that you recognize from Photoshop. But something I do want to warn you about is, even though it looks like the tools from Photoshop, a lot of times it does not act like the tools from Photoshop. So let's start off with our workspace. Right now we have the Essentials workspace. Yours could be different. The Essentials workspace is great, especially if you're working on a tablet mode here. For a touch workspace, it's got everything really quick to find. You can always go up to Window and you can add more to your workspace. So if I want to, in my workspace, have swatches, then those will pop up. I can even attach those here. And now I've got all of my colors in this little section here, right? Easy. Now, I might want to try a different workspace. Me being a millennial and having grown up with this, mine is Essentials Classic is my go-to. I prefer to have this one. It has a lot of functionality to it. You can do lots of different variations of things. I feel like it's just easy to find everything I need with this. However, you might be working on something that you're painting. Maybe you want to use you want to use the workspace that is more conducive towards painting and doing some sort of digital painting. So this here lays out the best functions that you'll need for painting, for digital painting through Illustrator. Like I said, my go-to is always Essentials Classic. However, I could totally see using these for other various more specific purposes. So now that I've got my favorite workspace, let's go ahead and let's talk about rulers. Um, when you're working on a vector-based program, a lot of times you are trying to create a very specific design that's going to fit on a very specific type of format. And it's kind of good to see how big you're making everything. It's not usually something your clients want to hear, that you just guessed what size was best. You want to give them a better idea of what you're trying to do. So you're going to go up to the top. Next to window, you'll find view. And if I go to view, I can go down to where it says rulers. I want to show rulers. When I show the rulers, you can see that where my cursor is actually shows up on the ruler here. So if I want to start something that's 6 inches over from the edge, because that's what the client wants, then I could totally line up my cursor at the 6 and the 1 inch and then draw whatever it is I want. This is especially important if you need to have some sort of border on yours. And you want to make sure that you don't go over the edge of that border. Now, another thing you can do that's really cool is if you have borders, you can grab from the rulers, click and drag, and give yourself an idea of exactly where you need to line things up or keep things from going over. So if I click and draw from the top here, I've got a 1 inch and a 1 inch border on the left side and the top. And I can do that for the bottom as well. And I can have, since this is an 11-inch paper, I can put one there. And then on the right side, this is 8.5, so I want to go to 7.5 to give myself an inch on the right side too. So there you have it. That's my rulers. That's how I can keep myself within my boundaries here. And you can use this to create different sections, rows, all that. If you want to get rid of a guide, it's really easy. You select the guide and you delete it. You just press the backspace or the delete button, right? So I use this black arrow here, click on it, click on backspace, and it's gone. Alrighty. Now, I can go up and do some other things. So let's talk about smart guides. You might have noticed, well, you can't really see it just yet, but sometimes when I scroll over things, I get like little words and stuff. When you have shapes in there, you'll see that it'll bounce around throughout the shapes. If you hate that, if that's super annoying, you can turn off smart guides. And so now when I scroll over things, it doesn't tell me anymore what I'm looking at. I think smart guides can be kind of useful, so I'm going to keep mine on. If it's slowing your computer down, smart guides could be something that could cause things to slow down. There's plenty of things that can cause that, though, truly. And then you've got a few different things here too. So if, say, you're trying to get a very, very exact lined up placement, a grid is a really good way to do that. And my grid, you can see, is actually lined up inch by inch here. And then I can also hide the grid again. If I wanted to, in my view panel, go to snap to point, that sometimes can be an issue if you're zoomed out and you're trying to do things quickly. Snap to point can sometimes get in the way, but sometimes it can also help you. So as you get to know the program, you'll kind of figure out what you like and what you dislike. So let's go ahead and let's start by putting a shape in there. So you're going to go over to your tools. You're going to click on your rectangle tool and you're going to select any of these tools, right? Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go ahead and do an ellipse tool. Now there's two ways to put a shape in. You can either click once and then type in how big you want it to be. So if I want mine to be 5 by 5 inches, I type in 5 by 5. It's going to give me a perfect circle. And it's going to be a 5-inch perfect circle. To move the circle around, I can click on this black arrow here, the selection tool, and I can click click on the path and move it around. Now you'll notice that you can't see the shape at all. So I'm going to go ahead and give my shape an outline by going to this little box that has another box inside of it, a smaller box inside of it. This is going to give it an outline. And then I'm going to go over here to this other box that has the red arrow in. It's just a little box, and I'm going to give it a color. So I'm going to give it this gold color. All right, now it should be a little easier to see and move around. You can always make adjustments while you're in the black arrow to create the exact size that you want. You'll notice as I'm adjusting it that there's a little gray box following it that's telling me exactly what size I'm making it. And then, so that's one way of creating a shape, right? Now there's one other way that I'm going to show you. You can click on your tool again, your shape tool, whichever one you chose. Mine was the ellipse tool. And I'm going to click and drag. When I click and drag, I can create the shape that I want. So I'm going to have you do that on yours. Now I'm going to go back up. I'm going to change this. There's a few other options that you can select. You could do a pattern on the inside, and you can see that pattern is also see-through in this one, so we can see the other oval behind it. I could also do a gradient. You can make patterns and you can make gradients with yours. So that's totally something you could do if you wanted to. So I'm going to switch back to my black arrow tool and click off of it. You can see that that gradient just looks gorgeous next to this orange, kind of golden orange ellipse. Alrighty. So those are a few things that you can do with Illustrator that are semi-similar to Photoshop. So let's talk about some ways that it's different. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about vectors and what vectors can do for us, which would have been so much nicer for some of the projects you guys were working on. And you'll go, wow, I need to use Illustrator more because it would have been so much easier to do this. So right now I have what's called the selection tool. You might have noticed that there is a white arrow next to that black arrow. This is the direct selection tool. So if I select the direct selection tool and I click on one of these shapes, I can go to one of these anchors, right? And click on those. When I click on an anchor or one of those little points there, it gives me what's called a handle. Then I can move this handle and I can change my ellipse into some other shape, right? Gives me a more exact look. So it looks like now it's kind of like gooping off. I can do this where I change the shape here so that this looks like a potato chip. You can do whatever it is you need on here with these tools to manipulate these objects further. Now, in addition to this, you can add to these shapes. So I have right now this ellipse that only has these 4 anchors on it. But say I want to move these parts in too. I would need something on my path in order to move that, which, by the way, you can grab and move the paths too. Control Z works to undo, just like in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to this tool called the pen tool. If I click and hold the pen tool, you'll see it's got a few different options. I have an add anchor point tool, delete anchor point tool, and then an anchor point tool. I'm going to click on add anchor points. I'm going to go up to my path. If it's selected, it should allow me to add an anchor point there. And I'm going to go here and add another anchor point. Once I have those 2 on there, I'm going to go right back to my direct selection tool, which, by the way, is A for a hotkey. You should definitely get to know your hotkeys for this program because it comes in handy quite often. And now I can manipulate these, right? Once I have my shape made, I can also do other things. So for example, I can create more of a curve by clicking on the anchor and moving the handle in. I can, create all kinds of weird shapes. It's kind of getting in the way. Yeah, keep missing. Now it's kind of looking like an elephant. I can also delete anchor points. So I go, I don't like this one. Bye. Bye. There you go. Now it looks like a T for a golf. I could also go into this anchor point tool here, and I can click on the anchor and notice how it gets rid of the handles. I could also click on it again and drag and bring my handles back. So you can do all kinds of crazy things with it. I want you to kind of play around with that a little bit, create some sort of funky shape, and leave one of your shapes intact with the other one in as well. So you can put them anywhere you want next to them. Like I said, this kind of looks like a golf tee. Now, once you've kind of played around with your shape, let's talk a little bit about layers. So like Photoshop, Illustrator has layers. So if I go over to the layers panel over here, which looks like two stacked pieces of bread, that's what it reminds me of, is a sandwich. I can click on this, and then you can see my layer one right here. You can also see this color, this layer. Everything I select is going to have that blue outline. If I do a new layer, you'll notice that there's a red color here. Everything I put in this layer is going to have a red outline, which is really handy if you have a lot of stuff on here. I'm going to go ahead and throw away layer 2 for now. You have a little eye here, which makes it disappear. And then you also have a lock that you can click right next to the eye in that little space. If you click on the lock, you'll notice it won't let you draw anything. And then finally, I also have all this other stuff going on. So one thing you can do if you've lost track of something is you can click on it in your layers panel. So if I go over here and I go, I can't seem to select the ellipse because everything's on top of it and I can't get to it. You go over here, you find your ellipse, you click on this and you've selected your ellipse. Now you can move it around. Now you won't have to struggle with that. Another thing you can do is you can, just like Photoshop, move the order. So if I want my ellipse to be under this path here, then I can do that. And then I can have that on top or switch it around if I want to. All right. So layers, just like Photoshop. One thing I did forget to talk about was your edge for your shapes has the ability, well, here's an example. I'm trying to get to this thing under here. Click on this one. Now I've got this one selected. Now you want to make sure you're on your black arrow, your selection tool. And you can kind of play with your stroke a little bit. So the stroke is the outline. If I click on the arrow here, it'll give me a bigger stroke, right? Or a bigger outline. If I play around with this, it gives me a thinner line in some places, a thicker line in other places. Kind of think of it like a calligraphy pen. That's what this does, is gives you different types of edges. And then in addition to that, I've got this little section here that says basic, and I can change what kind of edge I have, what kind of outline I have, to all kinds of crazy things. You can even download more from these menus that are over here. And this will give you also different types of edges, kind of like a calligraphy pen once again. So once I have my thing that I'm happy with, let's talk now about starting from scratch and what sorts of things you can use to draw from scratch. So we have underneath the shaper tool here, we have a few other tools. One is a pencil tool. I can use this to, and I'm going to do this on a new layer. So I'm going to lock this layer 1 and I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to name this layer 1 shapes. And on layer 2, I'm going to name it drawing. I'm actually going to pause the video here and then we'll start up with a new video starting with this new layer here. How do I pause the video? There we go. So I'll start the new video on the